Welcome back. This is the second of a two-part video on consignment tracking in PartsWatch. And now that you know how to add consignments from the first video in the series, let's get started on editing, closing, and reporting the consignments. So, should your customer use any consigned items and want to restock them, they'll be purchased at point of sale using all the existing invoicing functionality. And any defective parts will be returned through point of sale also. Returning new resellable parts is an indication that those parts are no longer needed to be stocked by the customer and should be returned against the consignment. To edit a consignment, let's go back to the consignment list screen and double-click the existing consignment or highlight it and click the Consignment Setup tab. You can add parts or increase or decreased consigned quantities by clicking in the New Quantity field and changing the quantities. To remove parts from an open consignment, change the new quantity to 0. When the screen is refreshed, the row will no longer show. Above the grid is a field named Show Changes Only that can be used when an existing consignment is edited to refresh the grid and display only those parts that have a value in the new column, and uncheck it to display all the parts again. But it's not used to narrow the parts reported when the Print or Preview button is clicked. And then click Save to save the changes without affecting stock, or click Update Stock to save the changes and affect the available stock quantities with the increases or decreases from the edit. When a consignment is ended for whatever reasons, the customer will normally return all the parts currently on the consignment to the store, and the parts will be returned to stock using the Consignment Close tab. So click the Set All to Full button to return all the parts, and should any not be returned, edit the return quantity. The Set All to 0 button is used to zero out all the return quantities after edits have been made and you want to change them. You're not able to return a quantity greater than the consigned quantity. If the customer is returning quantities greater than the consigned quantity, return the extras through point of sale. When finished editing all the returned parts, click the Save button to save the edits to the consignment without affecting part stock quantities. The total return quantity above the grid is for information only and displays the total quantity returned when the Save button is clicked. Or click the Update Stock button and the system will prompt, "Are you sure?" Click Yes to close the prompt and increase the quantity available in the part table with the return quantity for all the parts returned on the consignment. And to move the consigned quantity from the return quantity field to the consigned quantity field for each part returned. And to close the consignment and change the status to closed. It will also update the current date and the end date and the last update fields. And again, the part histories are not affected when the parts are returned to stock. So if any of the quantities are not returned when the Update Stock button is clicked, the invoice screen opens with the invoice displayed in hold status. So finalize the sales order following existing functionality. And when finalized, the stock is not adjusted and the part histories are updated or not depending on the Consign Invoice Affects Sales History setup on the System General Setup screen. So uncheck that field if you don't want sales histories updated. Closed consignments can be redisplayed on the Consignment Setup tab by checking the Show Historical flag on the Consignment List tab and double-clicking the consignment. Closed consignments are view only and can't be edited or reopened. Click the Return List button to print the list of parts on a closed consignment, or print or preview for the Consignment Setup report. Closed consignments can be deleted using existing record retention functionality. Draft, open, and closed consignments can be copied to another account from the Consignment List tab. And just a couple other things before we look at reports. An account with a consignment can't be deleted until the consignment is closed. The same goes for lines and parts if they're on consignments. Parts can't be moved or fixed using the part move or part fix utilities. The Parts on Open Documents report output from the Inventory Information Report screen will include consigned parts on the report output. Okay, now let's look at reporting. Besides the consignments pick list and return list, and the consignment setup report, which are output from the consignment screen tabs that we already looked at, a couple other existing reports track consignments, including the part ledger, which has a new changed by of consignments and outputs a C in the changed by field on the report every time the stock quantity is adjusted by parts added, edited, or closed on consignments. The inventory cost report has a new consignments filter to report inventory changes with, without, and only outputting consignments. And the customer price sheet has a new consigned price sheet report that's used to output pricing for consignment accounts. Besides the regular filters, it has a couple new filters grouped by ship to, and if checked, each ship to name and address is reported separately with a break between each. And if unchecked, all of the consigned parts across one or more ship to consignments are sorted and subtotaled by line code. This lets you see all the parts consigned to one account within their separate ship to consignment addresses. And the ship to name field, which is used to select a ship to report. And we've mentioned the consignments reports, so now let's take a look at them. There are two new reports that can be used to analyze consignments by part and by account. The consigned inventory report outputs all parts on consignment by store by line across all accounts and ship to addresses. Besides the usual filters, the report can be output by status of open, draft, or closed. The setup price and core price levels from the System General Setup screen are defaulted, but can be changed. And check the New Edits Only field to output only the parts just edited on the consignment, or report all parts. And the Include New Quantity in Extended Cost field can be checked to include quantities in the New Quantity column, or just those where stock has been adjusted. And the report can be output by detail or subtotals. And for multi-store, by consecutive or summary. And each location can have page break or not. Okay, let's take a quick look at an example of each. So here's an example of the detail report. And here's an example of the subtotals report. And for multi-store, the consecutive detail and subtotals, and the summary detail and subtotals. Okay, and the consignments account report uses all the same filters and outputs parts consigned per account. So here's an example of the detail report and subtotals. And for multi-store, the consecutive detail and subtotals, and the summary detail and subtotals, and output of the cost of consignments is controlled with the cost GP% on Inventory Reports User Security Proc. And that's it for consignments. If you have questions and don't find the answers in F1 Help, then please contact customer support for assistance. And thanks for joining us.